Hello and welcome to the Superposition Guys podcast. My name is Yuval, and my guest today is Whurley, founder and CEO of StrangeWorks. We discuss Whurley's journey from founding Honest Dollar to starting StrangeWorks, the lessons learned in bridging science and business communication in quantum, and the transition from quantum only to advanced computing. Whurley also shares his views on the symbiotic relationship between AI and quantum computing and the importance of partnerships in building the industry. He reflects on the current state of collaboration in the quantum industry, his optimism for future breakthroughs, and much more. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Hello, Whurley, and thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
So who are you and what do you do?
So my name is Whurley. I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO of StrangeWorks, which is an advanced computing / quantum computing company in Austin, Texas.
Remind me how you got into advanced computing, quantum computing?
So I've been watching quantum computing for a number of years. I think the first time I ever heard about it was around 2000, probably early 2000s. When I really picked up interest was when Time Magazine put it on the cover the first time, about 9 years ago. And then we had a company called Honest Dollar, which was acquired on its 1-year anniversary by Goldman Sachs. It was the first technology company they had acquired at the time in their 147-year history. All the other acquisitions were about assets. We're a tech company. We certainly had no assets. And when I got to Goldman, it was clear that, I needed to find something cool to work on. And I suggested that they should do quantum. And we decided together jointly that I should start a quantum computing open source project with the Linux Foundation called the Global Quantum Initiative. And that led to getting everybody together over the course of a year for 2016 to the summer of 2017. And then a lot of people didn't want to work together. And I'd already invested all this time and effort and money into this. So I tried to do what I could to get it going. And when it couldn't, I said, well, we'll start a company to do it. And that's when StrangeWorks was born.
So from Honest Dollar to Honest Qubit. So
yeah, right.
What have you learned in this time, or specifically, what have you learned in the last, say, 6 to 12 months about the quantum industry?
I think it's fair to say that I probably learned my most important lesson. There were a lot of lessons. Obviously, you have a deep tech industry that's emerging. It's not really developed yet. So, you've got numbers all over the place. Will it be worth 0.9 billion in 5 years or 90 billion or $1 trillion? So we've all learned all of those lessons. But the lesson I learned this year was really where the demarcation point is between the science and the business, and where a lot of the misunderstandings come from, to be quite blunt. So, for example, I gave a talk at Q2B and I said there's been 89 worlds first and all of these things. And if that were true, there'd be more of an industry. But I tempered that by saying, in my next talk, maybe it's the viewpoint. If I'm a scientist and you move something 2 microns, that could be world-shattering news for me. But if I'm a CIO at a Fortune 500 company, that probably doesn't register at all. So I think, the big lesson was, nobody in quantum is necessarily misleading or trying to overset expectations. We read about all this hype. If you look at them from a pure science standpoint, there's some amazing advances that have happened. But you understand why the press looks at it and says, oh, you said something about, qubits and fidelity last year that sounded the same, or like they don't know. And then on the business side, we need to start getting more of those cases. And I think finally I learned, okay, here's how to communicate to both of those parties to get them to communicate together. Because that's where the disconnect is. You can say the computers are going to do all these wonderful things and be fast. But if I'm a CIO or CTO at a Fortune 500 Global 2000 company, I want to know what it's doing for me today. Like I want to put it, all the boxes I have go in data centers, right? Or they're at AWS and I access them. So finding that kind of, I want to say middle ground, and then being able to talk to both all of our partners on the quantum side and all of our customers on the business side and get them to where they're speaking the same language. That's been the biggest lesson for me in the last 12 months.
When you were describing the company 3 minutes ago, you said advanced computing and quantum. I think if I go back in the time machine, 2 or 3 years ago, it was only quantum. So how does this advanced computing
Well, it actually wasn't. If you go back to our seed pitch was that we would be like Tivoli or BMC for quantum and other technologies. Um, the That's a great question. Quantum is obviously the biggest thing we have in a focus, but once we got funded, part of the kind of directive, if you will, was what other computers are going to come in enterprise. Because let's talk about what the StrangeWorks value proposition was at that time back in 2018. It was one place you can come and you can access the machines, the hardware and software and everything that you need, because enterprises can't just take and spend money. They need a way to adopt them, to test them, to do stuff. At that same point is DNA compute, thermal compute, et cetera, et cetera. And now you're right, because if you look at the Wayback Machine, it was quantum focused until probably 3 years ago, right? Probably about halfway through the timeline. But that's about the time you saw Gil Verdon and a bunch of people break out, leave Google Quantum, start working on thermal compute, start working on DNA compute, start doing other stuff. And these were people we already worked with, and they were like, we want the new stuff on your platform. We were like, of course. And so that's where the advanced compute came a little bit more to the forefront.
What can a CIO or a CIO's people, what can they do on your platform today?
So they can access all the resources they need. They can also use the StrangeWorks workflows, which automates problem discovery and problem formulation, and then where you can go and deploy that software once it's written. They can manage all of that. I mean, one of the things we see is a big demand from enterprises: who's spending what money where and how do I set up, the provisions for that, so they can provision out time on the machines and things to their users. And effectively, they can jumpstart their quantum program. I mean, when you look at StrangeWorks, I would say that the biggest value we've always provided is kind of this time to value for the enterprise. From the time they sign up to the time they actually get value and say, like, okay, we want to spend more money, that's very short. And we try to always just keep shortening that shorter and shorter. That's led to companies like J&J and BP and others, coming back and renewing year after year after year and continuing to use the software, as well as expanding into business groups with even our investors now, like Hitachi and Raytheon, have put us into their ecosystems as well. So that time to value is really important to all of those classes of customers. They don't want a science project. They want a business result.
You mentioned workflows. How do you make sure that these workflows work well on the various types of quantum computers for those workflows that do use quantum?
So that's great. So our workflow products is a little different. Our workflow product starts with you uploading your white paper, your code, whatever, finding other resources you may not know about, both in our library and out there in archives or wherever, and pulling together for you. That's all automated. So very, very easy. When you get to the point of the machine, during that second step of workflows where you do the problem formulation, that's where we can determine, depending on what the problem is, where it's going, what it can run on in the background. So then when you get to that third step, okay, where can I execute this? That's where we give you a selection. So we don't say, oh, you could execute that on any one of these 30 machines. We say, you've all have permission to run on these machines and budget to run on this. And considering all of those and the code, here's where that can run. So the work we did early on was how we did gave the ability to our users to work across all these different quantum machines and different libraries and scaffoldings and things. So when you look at Qiskit and Circ and Penny Lane, or all of these ticket, all of those have been supported for a while. So we've taken all of that and wrapped it up in, I think 2 years ago, into the services. So like you had an optimization service that would run on multiple machines. Now the workflows has taken and effectively added this new abstraction layer on top of that. So it's still the same base if you think of it like a layer cake. This is just a layer that gets a lot more people in an enterprise able to play around and mess with the quantum machines.
Quantum and AI has been mentioned in one breath very often.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, there's some AI that can help design better quantum computers and so on. But how do you see it?
I get criticized for this. You got me excited. You can see my reaction as soon as she said it. I've been mentioning it in the same breath for the entire time this company has existed, but not in the way that people are using it now. There's a lot of pivots and stuff. To me, quantum and AI are symbiotic, and I'll tell you why. And there's plenty of recordings of me saying this all the way back to 2018. Quantum is us trying to use nature to compute, right? Fair. AI is us trying to create our own variant of nature's best computer, which is our brain, right? Like these are both physical systems. These are both physical things we're trying to do. So I think there's a lot more. Now, I had some of our favorite quantum, Twitter handles that like to do memes and stuff be really critical of that, but I don't think that they're that different. Now, as far as the use that you were just saying, the other thing I said is, look, AI is going to create algorithms that don't run on classical infrastructure. There's without a doubt, it already knows about quantum. It already knows about all these other systems. And it can be very helpful in helping us find some of the fundamental things with like the physics of error correction, with quantum mechanics and these things. So I think AI is probably the biggest boost to our industry that has come in the last 10 years. I think that a lot of people in quantum didn't like it because it sucked a lot of money out of the room last year. But as you saw, it got sucked out and then it went away right quick. And now we're kind of back to normal, right? Like, if you're pitching, your quantum startup, you're not getting a lot of talks about like, well, AI this or AI that, right? You're probably the one bringing it up. So I think it was a little issue with fundraising, but I think overall it's a huge boon and a huge win for us as a community.
You mentioned shortening the time to value.
Yes.
I define value today and your best guess on when there would be true business value in the sense of solving problems that you're unable to solve efficiently today.
So when you look at that, when I say time to value, that's based solely on a return on investment. You're going to pay me X amount of money. How long is it before you say, okay, I've spent that money well, and then I've got an actual measurable business return? And that leads to your second part of it, which is like, what is valuable? Look, I think you look at this from the math, not from the industries. So what are quantum computers okay at now? Okay, and this does lead you into the Nealer conversation and the digital use and all that. But combinatorial optimization, right? You can do that, and there's a lot of optimization problems in the world. Okay, what's going to be next? All right, there'll be some linear algebra, there'll be some differential equations. Factoring is still a ways away, in my opinion. All right, but you look at it from the functions of what it does, and then you go out and say, okay, what businesses can use those? And what businesses, when they apply those, will be able to leverage those into a big return, right? And that's kind of how we target who we're talking to and who we're working with. And that does lead you into pharma and finance and defense pretty heavily, there's no doubt. But, we have some wonderful customers there, and we're having a good time working with them. So, if it's not broke, there's no need to repair it.
So no guess on the timeline for...
I guess that's what I'm saying is like, I think, value, like beauty, is in the eye of the beholder. So I think there's value to companies with quantum today. Like, I don't think there's a wait. Now, if you're talking about when will every Fortune 500 company use quantum computing, and you're getting closer to a general purpose quantum computer and all of that, I think 2029, 2030 is a fairly decent, guess. Could always be much earlier, could also be later, right? But I think, you see a lot of the hardware manufacturers, and we love them all, so be careful not to pick any out and single name them. But, you see a lot of them around that kind of similar date time frame, I think, now. Whereas, when we first met, good Lord, it feels like decades ago now, which it wasn't. A lot of people were like, oh, 2 years, 5 years, it was a lot closer assumptions. But look, there's value today, and there better be value today, because we took in $2 billion, or a little over $2 billion in 2022 and 2021. So that's, you add up just the venture money into quantum, there's $6-7 billion invested now. So there should be some business value. But I think it's hard for us to go into businesses and really, really, really demonstrably prove that we have value, because we are fascinated with the science, which is absolutely fascinating. And we are focused on the art of bringing this mythical quantum computers into reality, and sometimes aren't as focused on what the business needs, right? They do, it's all often said and always true, better, faster, cheaper, right? That it doesn't matter if we have a quantum machine that's general purpose and it's 10 million times as much if it costs 100 times as much, right? They probably won't use it. So I think that we just have to look at that. When you look at it from that perspective, you say, well, where are there opportunities for value in enterprises today? True, there are probably a fraction of the value we'll see in 2 years' time, and 100% a big fraction of what we'll see in 5 or 10 years' time. But that doesn't mean there's not value today. I think we have to get the industry past that. We have to start showing things that aren't just proof of concepts. What we found, though, that hurts the industry is when you do something value with the customer, they don't want you to tell anybody about it. This has been kind of the bane of my existence for the last 3 years, which is we have great customers. We're like, we have great customers, and you can call them. They'll be like, we're great customers. We love them. You're like, what are you doing? And it's like, silence. So I'm very happy that hopefully towards the end of this year, early next year, we have some of our customers are finally ready to talk about what they've been doing for the last few years. And I think that's what we need. We need more cases where an enterprise CIO can go and look at something and say, oh, my competitor did this. I have to be on this. Or that's an advantage I could use in my industry, or whatever the case may be. But, it's everybody wants to bitch and moan and complain. And, oh, it's overhyped, or it's overvalued, or it's this or that. Like, here's the reality. It's hard. Nobody's ever done this before. Like, there are quantum computers for a reason. Because if it was easy to do quantum computers, we'd have had them in the 60s, right? We had them in the 80s. I mean, IBM has notes going back decades on their work on quantum computing. So, I think we just have to be realistic about the values there. There is value today. The value is going to increase over time, and be a little bit more focused on translating all of our quantum wishes and dreams into basically business requirements and KPIs and things that the business will understand and invest more money in quantum.
As nice as your platform is today, it would not be as nice without your technology partners, without the quantum computer, consulting services, and so on. What advice can you give to entrepreneurs listening to this about building a partnership or building an ecosystem?
Okay, this is one of my favorite topics. Startups are team sports, okay? And not everybody that supports the team works on the team. They're not all players, right? Think of your startup like you're, I don't have a favorite football team, but I went to a UT game 3 weeks ago. So it says UT. They're on the road in Oklahoma. There's a band and there's vans and there's all of these stuff. And so when you think about, as an entrepreneur getting into deep tech, you want a lot of friends, right? You want to know as many people as possible. You want to really have it out, but you want to approach it as a team. I mean, one of the things I love is that we don't even call our customers customers. They're just another partner. They just give us money instead of things. And, we do different work with them. I think when you're in a new industry, when you look at quantum, people don't want to be sold. They want to be invited to participate. And so bringing them as a partner, working with them hand in hand becomes really important. Having the relationships to build the now over 40, 50, whatever partners that StrangeWorks has, super useful. You never know where you're going to learn something or find something out. Startups are a team sport. It's very, very important to figure out all of those players. And by the way, teams compete. Think about it like this. You watch the Olympics this year. Guess what? Everybody on Team USA plays for a different team in their job. And so there's other activities, like you think about QEDC, you think about JESTA, you think about CERN, you think about a lot of the activities where we're all kind of on the same team. And so that's why, I continually try to tell people there shouldn't be competition in quantum right now. There should just be collaboration. Like, we should all be helping each other to actually build the foundation for the industry. And when it hits, look, some people are going to be great at competition and nice, and some people aren't going to be nice people in competition, but we're just not at that point yet. When we get to the point where businesses are calling us saying we need to get on quantum computing, we get to the point where the press is not saying it's overfilled hype cycle, but here's a demonstrable proof point, everything changes. But we are still nowhere near there, and we should be all helping each other and partnering. And anybody coming into this, my advice would be partner with as many people as you can. Keep their secrets. Don't cross the streams. Very important. build their trust over time, and know that you may invest time in a relationship that never produces anything. But, it's what we need. We're trying to build an industry here. And by the way, we're all going to have the hits and we're all going to have the misses. So there's no reason in trying to have a big ego about it and, pretend that things are different than what they are. This is one of the most impactful, most important industries in the history of our species. And it, combined with AI and other technologies, are set to change the world more in the next 10 years than they have in the last 100. But it's going to take a lot of working together. End of story.
So if we exclude your company, StrangeWorks, and Quera, the company I work for, who do you think is doing a good job in building partnerships in our industry?
So obviously, I'll break it into 3 categories. On the consulting side, obviously, they're great at that. So they're, whether it be, Shreyas at Accenture or Scott at Deloitte, or I guess Kristen left EY recently, but they're all awesome at that. So they start there; they're the masters. Go down a layer and say, okay, what about software people? I talk to Matt at QCware all the time. We're planning some stuff together. Nir over at Classique has been awesome at getting and working with us at partnering. Michael over at Q Control. There's a lot of there's plenty of good people on that side. And on the hardware side, I see that a lot more now than I did in the past too. You, sir, are one of the best collaborators in the industry, right? And have brought that to your new job. Nick over at AeroQ. There's a lot of collaboration on the hardware side. So I think people are starting to see the value of that. I think right now we're moving towards a high point in collaboration. It's kind of funny. You would have thought we would have started very collaborative and then ended up very competitive. And my limited 8 years around this industry, it's like it was very competitive, very academic, and now it's coming back to collaborative, and then eventually it'll get competitive again. But I'm really proud of the community. I was at Quantum World Congress a couple weeks ago. Before that, I was at QB over in Tokyo, and the amount of people willing to share, and the big thing to do 3 or 4-way deals, which I haven't seen, where you have a consultancy and a couple hardware providers and a couple software providers, even 4 or 5 companies kind of talking together about how they could work to help one customer. That's valuable because the customer doesn't care if they split it with you and me or you and me and somebody else. They have a problem they want to solve. And the faster we get to solve those problems, the faster we see an industry take off.
Are you guys hiring? What are you looking for if you're hiring?
So we are hiring. We are a software company. We have a chief scientist. We have scientists on staff, but compared to a lot of other companies, we're not trying to be a consultancy or do a lot of research. We're going to hire a few of those, primarily software developers. Those are going to be squashed by where we're at in the development of the company. We're hiring sales teams, expanding internationally, starting the market, which we've never really marketed ourselves. I wrote a couple cheesy books and we've got great design, but we've never spent, money on let's go out and market, let's have a campaign, let's do road shows, let's do that stuff. So a lot of people on the business side, right? We're going to be looking for a lot of that. I'd say that's primary. Secondary will be development, and then scientists after that. But if anybody, look, we're always happy to hire smart people too. We're when it comes to the right person, we don't have to have a job for them. That's kind of how Steve got hired before here at our last company. It's kind of how Justin and I met. So we're opportunistic on the hiring. We write the right person, the smart person. They can do a lot. You don't necessarily need to have a slot for them. In fact, sometimes it's better to work somebody into the company, give them a bunch of different stuff, and then kind of find what team do they vibe with and where are they producing the most, and then settle them into that direction.
So last hypothetical, if you could have dinner with one of the quantum greats, dead or alive, who would that be?
That's a tough one. I'm surprisingly, in the 8 years around this, I've never been asked that question. All right. So Schrodinger came to mind. Niels Bohr came to mind. Dirac or some of the other. It's I'll be blunt, as somebody fascinated with the technology who's not a physicist, any of them would be an amazing dinner for me. But, I'd probably go with one of the more popular ones. I've been really trying to read a lot on Schrodinger and Niels Bohr's and Dirac lately, which is why I mentioned that. So I've been like reading old papers and just trying to get my head wrapped around some of the thoughts and conjecture there. That's a great question, by the way. That's a true stump question.
And I ask it every week at every episode of this podcast.
Do people have like solid, like are people like, oh, it's this, are they all like Feynman?
I think half of them say Feynman.
Yeah.
That's by now has sort of been the cop-out question, the cop-out answer. But others, Schrodinger comes up and Dirac and Einstein and many others. And sometimes it's people from outside quantum, just mathematicians or other historical figures. So anyway, Whurley, thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.